What I'm going to talk about here is really important. It's about where they're going with they're going after Peter Navarro, they're going after Bannon, they're going after Trump's lawyers. The left, no one's sounding the alarm properly on this, because the leftists and the fascist leftists and the spirit that's over them, the media mind control, they don't have any alarms about this. But what they're going to start to do is criminalize freedom of thought. Jordan Peterson, for instance, has to pay like $30,000, $40,000 a month in legal fees to fight with having his psychiatric license pulled by the university and by the cowardly clinicians who listened to, read parts of a transcript from an interview with Joe Rogan. And they said, you need to have your license either, revoked, or you have to go to special sensitivity training with a social media expert. Imagine that, Jordan Peterson having to go. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to broadcast your training so my audience can learn how to be more sensitive in our social media skills. Talking to an esteemed analyst like Peterson. Well, I'll tell you what, this program is very important to me. It's going to be very important to you because it deals with the controlling thought patterns that are trying to dominate people. I want you to get a hold of a product, of a training I did, anticipating we were going to come into this era. I mean, this is how I got to keep myself in the gym so I don't back up from being strong and courageous on speaking the truth. And it's breaking controlling thought patterns, because what's happening is we're getting bombarded from media, from sound bites, from peer pressure, and the schools are the worst. They're going after the kids. This media mind control has to be resisted intentionally. If you don't have a filter up, it'll kind of almost like it'll shed. The thoughts will start shedding into your subconscious, start picking up on their thought patterns. Breaking controlling thought patterns is an 8-part e-course that I developed. And I really marketed it inexpensively. But I'm going to give you guys half off for the next 30 days. Breaking controlling thought patterns. Go to lancewallnau.com/freedom. It's the guaranteed e-course on how to detect the thought patterns that the enemy's trying to penetrate and how to put up the buffer in your thinking so that you can discern when the enemy's trying to penetrate and how to grab a thought and pull it out when it tries to have dominion over you. lancewallnau.com/freedom. It's normally $127 for this 8-segment course. And even that is inexpensive compared to what e-courses are. But I'm going to give you half off for the next 30 days. Why? Because I want you to have it. I looked at our inventory today and I said, this is where we're at right now. lancewallnau.com/freedom. Break those controlling thought patterns off. And as you do that, you help to fund us with the ability to stay on the air and not be afraid of censorship, because I get taken down, I get hit economically, I get hit in 100 different ways, but I stay there because our partners and the people that invest in our training, they're the ones that allow us to stay open and unafraid in speaking the truth in love. So go there right now, lancewallnau.com/freedom. Look at what's there, the 8 courses. You'll love it. It's like an 8-course dinner. And you get half off for the next 30 days if you jump on it. Let's get into this broadcast, too. This is powerful. Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. And today, we're going to be actually focusing on some really interesting material. Now, Mercedes Sparks is with me here in the studio today. Mercedes.
Hello, Lance.
And you're our source for unusual, but it's always a surprise to me, citizen journalism is what we look for. That's the people that are finding out there the information and sending it into us. But in the citizen journalism world, you kind of have an instinct for TikTok, which is kind of surprising to me.
People hate TikTok. We got to stop saying it's from TikTok. We're just saying it's Instagram stories, because it could be. It could be.
Oh, is it? It's okay. Oh, yeah, because we also have communist TikTok invasion.
Communist TikTok. I know it. But you get the algorithm over there is so much better than anywhere else. You get actual news coverage like what we're going to show you. So,
for instance, if you have not come in, oh, my gosh. I mean, you have certainly are aware of the fact that Australia and New Zealand flippin' lost their minds during.
This portion is too hot to handle for social media. Go to lancewallnau.com/podcast to listen to the entire show.
Joe Biden says climate change is more frightening than nuclear war. And so did you ever think we'd be sitting here at a G20 conference where everyone was preoccupied with the notion of global warming? Not a joke. Did you ever think that? He has his stupid little lines that annoy me now. Not a joke. No joke.
Come on, man.
So he says, so what can we do in the meantime? Well, first of all, in the meantime, President Biden, you might want to consider the fact that while you're worried about global warming and you're going to be continue to put these draconian measures in place to put us $2 trillion in debt as a country, while we shut down our domestic oil production, our energy production, so that we ourselves are having to buy the oil from Venezuela, who is sending us sludge that goes into a Houston factory and belches out pollution in the air because you won't let us use our own oil, our own economic advantage, and export it and make money because you're environmentalist nut jobs that are controlling our economy. Because of you, China is belching out so many cubic tons of coal and pollution into the atmosphere that you don't talk about. You're doing a G20 summit touting your attack on climate while China and Venezuela and these other countries, and by the way, you're living in a global world here. It's a world without walls. You don't have any kind of environmental border up there between us and China. So China puts out the pollution, and it works its way all the way over to the United States and comes down. So we are connected together, and this is the point of the insanity of crippling the American economy in the name of environmental wackoism, while China, which we're connected to and joined to at the hip, never gets a correction or a rebuke, and they are violating every rule, along with India, and they have to, in order to meet the economic necessities of their poor and emerging middle classes, while we are crippling ours. And that's the part that only media can bring out, the insanity of the environmentalist agenda, the fact that we're living in a global community. Besides that, did anybody do an analysis of the pipelines? Because Biden's he says that, for example, that pipeline, that railroad we're talking about, that's going across from India through the Middle East to across the Mediterranean and all through Europe, it's going to have a hydrogen pipeline there. They're talking about the hydrogen pipeline. Has anyone discussed the pollution that America contributed to when it shot the Nordic pipeline and blew it up? And all of the methane or all of the gas that was in the pipeline suddenly is at biblical proportions, bubbling up in the ocean like a giant cauldron of pollutants. Did anybody do an analysis of what we did to the waters when we decided to economically try to cripple Russia by blowing up their pipeline? And then all of that went into the ocean. How did that affect the fish? How did that affect the algae? How did that affect the plankton? Well, nobody's ever talking about it because we live in this kind of weird kind of cubicles where we talk about environment. We're going to be taking truckers. I'm just reading this today. Truckers, economists sound an alarm and say Biden's regulations are going to kill the industry. Well, what regulations? He's pushing unrealistic vehicle regulations. Of course, the environmental wackos that don't drive a truck for a living are saying, we got to stop trucks. Everything's got to be electric. Well, what happens if you do that? I'm going to give you an example of this. If you look at what the trade association is saying, most are small business trucks. These new greenie regulations and emission standards perhaps cost as much as $45,000 per truck for a self-employed trucker. That's what it's going to cost. Then they have these things like, the Affordable Care Act or the Inflation Reduction Act, which is never affordable and it's never reducing. They're allocating $370 billion to address climate change. The $1 trillion legislation is replete with provisions promoting green energy, such as a $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles. But here's the reality of the problem. A new clean diesel long hauler trailer that is good for the environment will cost this guy who wants to go in business $180,000 to $200,000. But if he's going to do what Biden is making him do with his goofy, electric transgenderism of the vehicle, the comparable battery electric tractor cost will be $480,000. That means you're going to have to come up with $300,000 you don't have as a business owner. Who is this going to affect? Any small business trucking operation is going to be crippled. They don't care about it because it's environmentally. Meanwhile, they're going to be doing their gift to the American environment, and I just got done saying India and China, who have 2 billion people to our 370 or 430 million people, they're going to pollute the atmosphere, and it's all going to come over to the United States anyway. But we're not going to deal with crippling those economies or even challenging them. This is the kind of thinking that, and I want you guys to think about this, just because it's so important that we put rationality back into government. And the few facts you have here, go check them out. Check them out. You'll find out that I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I don't have all the exact metric tons of data in front of me, but it's all there. You can look it up. And what you're going to see is, as your politicians are talking and your news media isn't really challenging the narrative, let programs like this give you enough information to be able to say, well, how do you deal with the China and India and what they're doing with coal and what they're doing with, or Venezuela for that matter? Why are we buying our energy from there? Let me give you one final thought here. It's going to be on an up note, because I do believe that hidden in all of this data is something encouraging. I'm going to find it. It's in, aha, I found it. Happy note for you. America has enough energy that if Trump was back in office, we could have full spectrum energy independence and dominance. We wouldn't have to worry about the BRICS nations such as Saudi Arabia and Iran doing business with each other in their petrodollars, because we would be able to sell the oil. Now listen to this. A lithium deposit was found in the United States that may be among the world's largest. Who knows what's under the soil? Who knows what's under the soil of this blessed nation? This deposit, which would be essential for electric vehicles as such in the future, is 28 miles long and 22 miles wide. Estimated to contain as much as 20 to 40 million metric tons of lithium. Who knows what is there beneath the soil of America? God does, and I think there's still hope for America. Keep praying, folks. The night gets dark, but the dawn is coming. And we look forward to being with you on every broadcast, because the darkness has come into the world, but it has not been able to overcome the light. And that's what the Apostle John wrote, and that's what we say here. The light still shines. And we're going to be seeing you again on our next broadcast.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.